I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm going to talk to Justin Renton, who leads the church in Johannesburg, South Africa. Justin talks about what it was like becoming a Christian under the system of apartheid. He goes on to talk about his early life racing go-karts and dreaming of becoming a Formula One driver. He talks about the book that he and his wife wrote, The Healing of a Wounded Idealist. He shares about some of his near-death experiences he's faced, and how he handles the pressure of leading a church, helping other churches, and running disciples today. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Before we get into the program, I want to ask you to please register for the Climb Small Church Leadership Conference. With all that you're facing going through COVID and trying to grow spiritually, make disciples, and help others to grow, you owe it to yourself to go to Dallas this December 2021 for the Climb Conference. Here's how it'll help you. The Friday program is designed to help you in your personal world, to grow and to find peace. Experts in the area of spiritual and mental health will be teaching and offering ways for you to do better than ever in your interior world. The Saturday program is customized to help you to plan your ministry, develop your preaching, add new techniques and ideas to make your ministry grow and flourish in 2022. And finally, you'll be surrounded by people like yourself, people who want to grow, advance the kingdom, and make this life count. Sign up today at robskinner.com for the Climb Conference, December 2nd through 5th, 2021 in Dallas, Texas. I'll see you there. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Today on my program, I've got Justin Renton from Johannesburg, South Africa. He and his wife Irene lead the church in Johannesburg, as well as oversee other churches throughout Africa. I'm looking forward to talking to him. He's a powerful man of God, and I'm excited to find out what he's doing in South Africa. Justin, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be on your podcast.
It's fantastic to have you. Now, Justin, I don't think we've ever really met personally. I mean, we may have bumped into each other at a conference, but our world, I think we've literally been on the other side of the world from one another, whether it's in Japan and you've been in South Africa. But it's really nice to get to know you a little bit better today, and I look forward to talking. Can you share with me, how did you become a Christian?
I grew up in a non-religious household. My dad was a atheist / agnostic. My mom was a non-practicing Catholic, and we never went to church ever growing up. I think there was one time we went to a Sunday school, and my dad said to me, do you want to go to Sunday school next week or come, for milkshakes with me, next Sunday? And for my brother and I, it was an easy choice, so that was sort of our church upbringing. And when I was at university, I was at Wits University, and interesting enough, there was a riot going on the university against apartheid. So the students were rioting, and the police came onto the campus, and they started firing tear gas into the crowd. And I ran away and hid in the library. And I'm literally standing in the library, and this guy turns to me and he says, "Hey, you want to come to Bible talk?" And it was Gary Knutson, who was on the mission team to South Africa.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, what is that? I mean, what is that all about? And he told me a little bit about it, and it's sort of, practically understanding the Bible and where it came from and how it can be used in our life. And I thought, okay. And he gave me a little invitation card, and that little invitation card sat on my desk for about 3 weeks, and it kind of looked at me, and I looked back at it. And after about 3 weeks, I said, I actually should go. I know nothing about the Bible. and it seems like it's an important book to get to know about. So I went and found the Bible talk fantastic. It was so encouraging and interesting, and so we started studying the Bible. I studied the Bible for about 9 months, during this time period, and got to a point where I realized, okay, this is actually calling for a lot of changes in my life. And then went to work for a racing team in Europe over a holiday and took Evidence That Demands a Verdict, because I thought, boy, if I'm going to make these changes, I better be convinced that this is really true. You know? And read that book, the Josh McDowell book, Evidence Demands a Verdict, and was so convinced by the evidence. I was like, wow, this is amazing. All the scientific evidence, for creation. It was really impressive, and came back and said, okay, I'm ready to go. I want to become a Christian. So that was December of 1987.
Okay.
So that was my journey.
You got baptized December of 1987. When was the church planted?
In 1986.
Okay.
So I think July of 1986. So it was a very small group. It was probably not much more than about 100 people meeting on Sundays. Maybe the church itself was 50 or 60 members. But it was blow away. It was, because it was multiracial from the start, and it just was unheard of back then to have these multiracial groups. And you walk in, and blacks and whites are hugging each other, and they clearly like each other. There's friendships, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the future of South Africa. I mean, this is just so unique and so different. So that was a huge draw card and attraction to the church, was just the diversity and the love, and being in apartheid South Africa, that was very unique.
How was that different than what you'd been used to growing up, having that kind of mixed race meeting?
Yeah, so most of my life was very segmented off, and so really all my parents' friends were white. I went to mostly white high school and schools. There was a little bit of mixing in my high school, which was great. It was a private school, so we were allowed to have mixed races, but it was very minimal. I mean, it was 95% white, maybe 5% Indian or black. So to see a group that was sort of 50-50 mixed, getting on together, and it was a very unique experience.
I remember when that team was sent out, it was so groundbreaking because it was a team of blacks and whites together going there. Was it even legal at that time to meet like that?
It was. I mean, the government had rules that certain political gatherings weren't allowed, but it wasn't illegal to meet for a church service like that. So,
okay.
But they kept strict control over political gatherings.
I see. Now, How did you and Irene meet?
So we met in church. So it was at a sort of a campus devotional. So she and her sister came out to a campus devotional, and I was there. And we sort of met very briefly. Then she went down to study at university in Cape Town, and I went down to lead the church in Cape Town as a young single guy. And we sort of became friends, in the church in Cape Town. Then she moved up to Johannesburg and went into the ministry. And I moved back up, and now we're in the ministry together, and we, it was just like, wow, she's amazing. I hadn't seen it before. I think I was stuck in traffic, before, so then we fell in love and got married in 1997.
Oh, so you had like 10 years as a disciple being single. Okay, there was a little bit of a gap there.
I did. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Were you dating other sisters at the time during that period?
Yes. Yeah. So I dated other sisters. She dated other guys. I'd lived in Kenya for a while. So sort of being in Pretoria, started the church in Pretoria, so we'd sort of missed each other in some places,
Oh my gosh.
I was out for about 10 years before we got married.
Wow. Okay. So how old are you now, Justin?
I'm 54.
Oh, 54. Okay, great age. I love guys born in the 60s. That's awesome.
And you, Rob, how old are you?
I just turned 56, so we are very, very close in age. That's awesome. Now, what sounds like you were doing a lot of planting work there in the 80s and 90s. What led you to ministry?
So initially I'd really wanted to become a professional racing driver, pretty much from my teenage years onwards. And so that'd be my goal. I'd sort of, won some South African championships. I had gone and worked for a racing team in Europe. And my plan was to just go to Europe and pursue a professional racing career. And then I became a disciple, and I realized that really wasn't possible. Certainly back then, we had very few churches in Europe. The races happened on Sundays, so it really wasn't functionally possible to try and do something, like that. And so I had to go do military service. Every white South African was conscripted to do 2 years of military service after you finished university, and so when I was doing military service, I thought, well, what do I want to do with my life now that I don't really want to pursue racing? I thought, well, I've got a business degree. I could do that. I could try and do racing on a more local level here in South Africa, but that's difficult to make a living out of it. And I thought, but what really matters is actually how many people get to go to heaven at the end of my life. Mm-hmm. I thought that's actually probably the most important thing, is standing before God and saying, I used my time, I used my efforts to help people go to heaven. That's what I devoted myself to. And I thought that's actually really what I want to do,
right.
And I just felt that calling from God that's the best use of your time and energy that you can use, given that sense of calling from God. So that was probably the main driving force.
Wow. I want to talk more about that racing. Can you give like a little timeline from when you graduated from college to when you married your wife and up until now? Where have you been? What churches have you planted? Can you just share a little bit about your life and ministry up until now?
Okay. Including the motor racing part of that? Or?
Sure, of course. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I started racing as a teenager. My dad raced in the 1950s. He built his own racing car in the 1950s, and then sort of stopped it. But he took me to races growing up. So I'd sort of grown up going to Kyalami and watching the Formula One guys drive around Kyalami in the 1970s, and then I started racing karts. Actually ended up racing against Michael Schumacher. I don't know if you know who he is.
Oh my gosh, who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. So my dad and I went out for dinner with him and his dad. This is back in the 1980s, before he became famous. And so we raced twice against each other. He beat me on both occasions, but I think he was just lucky. He was very good. He was always, right from then, you could see he was a superstar in the making, So, and then moved up through the formulas, Formula Ford, Formula GTI, which is sort of an equivalent to Formula 4, Formula 3 in South Africa, and and just loved it. And as I said, was really, was sort of my passion to actually make it a career. Then finished the racing. And went to do military service, finished that, and then went into the ministry in 1991.
Okay.
So that was, and I started leading the Pretoria Church, which I started when I was there I had moved to Pretoria as part of my military service, and so I started the church. We started a Bible talk that grew to about 40 people. Then went in the ministry that grew to over 100 people, and then moved to Kenya from there. And that's really where I got to know Mike Tolliver, and he started discipling me and was part of the Kenyan sort of the early stages of the church in Kenya, and moved to Cape Town in 93 and 94, came back to Joburg, and then got married in 97, went back to Cape Town to lead the church. It was actually kind of interesting. We just bought a house, my wife and I. We literally had just bought our first house, and we settled into the house. We had Mike and Amjit over for dinner, and it was sort of a housewarming, and said, "Hey, this is our new house." And they said, "Oh, it's so great to see your new house. Can you move to Cape Town?"
Oh my gosh!
And we were like, what? We literally just bought a house. And he said, "Yep." And 6 weeks later, we were on our way to Cape Town.
Oh my gosh!
So we went down there. My daughter was born in Joburg just before we left. Then my son was born in Cape Town. We were there for 6 years, had a wonderful time there. My parents moved to Cape Town. They retired there. They lived just down the road from us, like 800 meters. So having grandma and grandpa, who are both disciples, as babysitters was just glorious,
right.
Next door. Then Irene's sister moved to Cape Town. Irene's brother moved to Cape Town. Irene's parents moved to Cape Town. So we were sort of set up with our family. And then I remember Nietzsche Aguirre, who led the Joburg church, came to us and said, "All right, we'd like you to move to Joburg and lead the Joburg church," And we're like, "Oh man, our whole family has just moved here."
My gosh!
And so we said, "No, thank you very much. We're very happy here," And then Mark Ottenweiler came and asked us, and we were, okay, wow, maybe we should pray about this. And then Mike Tolliver asked us, and eventually said, "Wow, this is, this seems like this is something God wants us to do." So that was 2007. We moved to Johannesburg. And I've been here ever since. So from now till here in Johannesburg. So that's kind of my timeline.
Wow, that must have been so tough to break that to your family.
Yeah, totally. No, it was very hard. So and my sister-in-law, married my best friend down in Cape Town. One of my best friends.
Right.
It was just like, oh my gosh, this is leaving all of our support, our family support sort of system behind. So it was definitely a tough move.
Oh my gosh, I hope your family's forgiven you for that move.
They have by now.
Okay.
So,
well, let's go back a little bit and talk about these racing cars. You ever get jealous watching Formula One on TV? I mean, right recently, Netflix has put together a documentary on Formula One racing called Drive to Survive. And
yeah.
I know you've seen that show, but it's really brought the kind of the backstage, the inner workings of Formula One to the masses. I mean, before that, I never knew anything about Formula One. I knew some big names. I knew Ayrton Senna. I knew Michael Schumacher, Niki Lauda. That was it. I mean, and I would just see the cars whizzing by on TV and then change the channel. It just meant nothing to me. But I think digging into the background of the drivers, it's really brought it to the masses. How do you feel watching that now? Watching that and thinking, man, maybe I could have been there.
Yeah, I love it. I watch it every weekend. I actually watch the highlights on YouTube just to get the highlights of it. And I've got a group of motor racing friends, literally from the 1980s. We have a sort of a WhatsApp group, and we chat about the race and how do we think the guys did. And so we stay connected as a group of old racing friends. And I've got all our opinions about who should be winning and who shouldn't in Formula One and the rule changes. I loved racing. It was adrenaline. It was excitement. It was a lot of fun. So I definitely, I miss the fun of it and the speed. What we're doing matters so much more in as disciples and as ministers.
So no regrets, no feelings like, hey, I missed the turn.
No, I don't think so. There were times I think, when I first gave it up that I felt that way, but no, I've made peace with it. So okay. I've asked God that if we can have some racetracks in heaven, then it's a good trade-off.
Did you ever have any major accidents in your kart racing?
I surprisingly didn't. I had only one that was sort of serious. I had a number of accidents, but only one that was serious where the car flipped upside down,
Oh boy.
and I went up across the track upside down. But never went to hospital, never broke a bone, never had anything serious happen. So I was very fortunate in all of that.
That's good. That's
But
good.
I've had some car accidents that I nearly died, and a couple of those, actually two or three, where I definitely could have I could have shuffled off. I think my guardian angel must have been doing some overtime on those.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, like when you look at at Formula One now, who's your favorite driver?
So presently, Max Verstappen, he's the guy I'm rooting for. Huge amount of respect for Lewis Hamilton. I mean, the guy is amazing. He is a legend. But I think Max Verstappen is sort of the young and up and coming star, and I think that he's going to be a star for the future. And Charles Leclerc, who's racing for Ferrari at the moment, he's also brilliant. So I think it's going to be some very exciting seasons coming up for sure.
I agree. It's been really fun to watch it recently. I saw Bottas won last week, I believe, which was, I always feel good about him. He's kind of in the shadow of Lewis Hamilton. It's nice to see him win. But I too, I really like Verstappen. He's young. He's like 23 and up and comer. Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. I was really happy that Daniel Ricciardo won recently, which was I thought he was, destined to just kind of fade away, but he really showed he can win. So that was really exciting.
Totally. And he's such a personality. It's great to have personalities like him in Formula One. He's just such a character. It's good to see him back on the podium.
Exactly. Well, I think they were so smart to start by focusing on him in the first season, the first episode, because he is such a larger than life, fun loving character. So that was really good. Okay. So let's back to the spiritual talk here. What do you do for fun? Like, what do you enjoy? Like, you've got a lot of responsibility. You've got a family. How many kids do you have?
2. I have my daughter who is 21 and my son who's 17.
Okay, so your kids are almost out of the house. What do you and Irene do for fun? Like, what do you guys like to do just to, enjoy yourselves, get refreshed?
So we love eating out. We really enjoy good food and sort of eating out at different restaurants and stuff. So we try and do that as often as we can. It's been a little tough, during COVID for some of those opportunities. And also movies. We actually love movies. We love sort of shows. We recently watched a show called Chernobyl, which is all about the meltdown of the reactor in Chernobyl and how it's just brilliant television. I mean, it's phenomenal. So so that's some of it. What I do for my personal fun is actually cycling. So we've got a group of guys here in the church who cycle every Saturday morning, and we sort of go out of Joburg into the sort of the hills around Johannesburg. And we, as part of it, we form a team for Hope Will Ride. And we ride each year to raise money for Hope. And so this team is anywhere from 30 to, it's been as high as 30, and it's probably about 10 people at the moment. But we go out there and just ride around sort of the countryside, do, 30, 40 kilometers, sometimes more, and then have breakfast together. And it's good. It's as good as therapy, I think, to get out there and get the wind in your hair and just talk and just, it's great. So really, really enjoy cycling. Right. I think you're a cyclist, aren't you? Or,
I like to motorcycle. I just did a cross-country motorcycle trip this summer, but not bicycling. Now, bicycling scares me. I just feel like I'm going to get nailed by a car or something like that. Yeah. I mean, have you had any accidents, any broken collarbones on your bike?
Haven't broken anything. I've gone over the handlebars a couple of times, so mostly mountain biking. And had a few accidents, and again, thankfully, never broken a bone. So,
oh boy,
it can be scary.
Oh boy, I mean, I've broken my collarbone twice on motorcycles, once when I was a kid and once about 10 years ago. So it happens fast when it happens. So when you say you're cycling, it's road riding. It's not
road,
mountain biking or anything like that.
No, so when I was in Cape Town, I would do mountain biking.
I see.
There's a beautiful forest there, and we had a group of guys that would do mountain biking there. Up here, it's actually more road cyclists. So most of the guys that I ride with are on the road. So I've converted to the road and enjoy it. Yeah, it's good fun.
Any surfing when you're down in Cape Town?
No, a little bit of boogie boarding.
Okay.
So I'm not a big surfer, but I did some boogie boarding with some of the guys down there, which is quite good.
I was watching an old American movie called Endless Summer. And they basically, it's about two young guys that travel the world to try to chase summer all around. So they start in America, then they go to Ghana, and then they go down into South Africa and they surf down it sounds like a wonderful place to surf. You got to watch out for the great white sharks, but it sounds like an awesome place to surf. We converted
it is. We got some really good surfing spots. We got a famous place called Jeffreys Bay, where when the tide is right, the wave sort of runs along the coast, and you can ride for like a half a kilometer or something like that. It's just,
gosh. Well, if I ever visit South Africa again, I definitely want to go down and do some surfing. Maybe we can do that together.
Oh, that would be great. That'd be awesome.
I would love that. We converted a guy here in Tucson a couple of years ago who was South African, and he loved to surf. And we took him out to San Diego to go surfing just to watch him, because he said, I can surf really well. We wanted to is this really true? Could this guy really surf? And he was amazing. I mean, he was just, total pro style, cutting and carving on the wave. We were like, oh my gosh, he really could back up what he was talking about. And it was funny because he goes, well, I've always heard about California and the waves. And he goes, they're much better back in South Africa. Anyway, okay. So Justin, how do you handle the pressure overseeing so many churches? I understand you're overseeing the churches in Africa, right? You kind of just help out. Is that not true?
Yeah. Just in Southern Africa, not in Africa. Yeah.
Okay, it's just Southern Africa.
5 families of churches. Yeah.
Okay, so this I see. Okay, and can you tell me what the scope of your responsibility is there? What areas are you looking out after?
So Southern Africa, we have 12 countries in Southern Africa, and 22 churches.
Wow.
So that's what the Southern Africa responsibility is. Yeah.
Okay, and you've taken on recently Roger Lamb's role as head of Disciples Today, which is a huge, huge responsibility, super important. How do you manage that? How do you keep focused? Tell me about that.
Look, honestly, it was a bit of a shock to have COVID hit literally as I was taking over Disciples Today. So it's actually been extremely difficult. I think, COVID and trying to lead through COVID and reconvert the whole way we do church and do ministry, and then taking on Disciples Today, it's actually been a massive stress for me. It was sort of a perfect storm of all happening at the same time. So it's actually been very hard. I ended up having to go on a sabbatical earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
So the stress has actually been quite high. It was unfortunate that it happened just as COVID hit. But I'm working on figuring out how to, because I love the work at Disciples Today, and it's so much fun. So I'm working with Mike and Ambajit on how to reduce some of my other responsibilities, so I can continue. But it's actually been unfortunately very stressful and very hard to try and balance it through this period of time. So
I can only imagine. I mean, it must really help your prayer life to have all these things going on.
For sure. Exactly. Totally.
What's been the impact of COVID on the churches in South Africa and in Southern Africa?
Yeah, we went to a very strict lockdown in South Africa. Went to level 5. You literally could not leave your house, for a long period of time when it first hit. I think our economy, I think if I remember correctly, our economy, the GDP shrunk by 51% in the first quarter. When COVID hit.
Oh my gosh.
It was massive. It was just a huge hit to what was happening. We ended up with almost 400 people in the Joburg church that needed financial support because either had lost their jobs or they had income reduced. Not all of them were disciples, but a single mom with her 3 kids.
Right, right.
So we were financially supporting a bunch of people. And then a lot of people didn't have internet access. We had a lot of older ladies in the church that had no internet access. So we had to figure out. So initially, what we're doing is we're printing out transcribing the services and hand delivering, printed out, of the service to some of these guys. And eventually we found some disciples that worked at a cell phone company, and they gave us a bunch of cell phones at a very cheap price. And we bought them, in almost all of the different regions to be able to help people get internet access at their homes so they could actually watch online. So it definitely was, initially a very hard adjustment, and extremely stressful to figure out how to minister to people here, this way. But now it's running smoothly, and we're going back to services, in-person services now. So I think we've just had our second one last weekend for this section after the third wave, So it definitely had an impact. Thankfully, it was not nearly as bad as they predicted. I mean, all the predictions, because of how difficult it was to social distance, all the predictions was that literally millions of Africans were going to die, because we couldn't social distance properly. So it was hugely stressful thinking how many disciples are gonna die through this,
Right.
And we've had a number of people to pass, and we've had lots of family members pass. Almost every week there's a few announcements within the announcements of someone's uncle or aunt or brother or sister has passed because of COVID. So it definitely has had an impact.
Wow. I know that we've heard about a South African strain of COVID that's come from South Africa. So it sounds like it's been particularly hard hitting there in South Africa. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, and Delta had a big impact here as well. And we do have a South African strain. Thankfully, it doesn't seem to have hit. I think it's called C+. It hasn't hit that many people. So. And I think we're very blessed as to our government has done a really good job of being clear in their messaging, being very strict about their protocols. They've actually done a really, really good job, I think, of managing this crisis. So I think if it hadn't been for how well they'd done, it would have been much worse.
Yeah. You changing the subject. You've talked about wounded idealists,
mm-hmm.
and that term just hit me like, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. Can you elaborate? What did you mean by that, and what were you talking about there?
So John Ortberg wrote a book called Faith and Doubt, and I was reading the book, and he said he made this quote. He said, "If you scratch under the surface of a cynic, you will find a wounded idealist there," and it really hit home. And I was speaking to my wife, who's definitely an idealist by heart. I mean, she is wired to be an idealist. She goes into every situation expecting the best outcome. She just is full of optimism and hope and excitement for how things can be. And then is constantly disappointed when stuff doesn't work out quite the way she expects, when God doesn't answer the prayers in time, when there's conflict in the church, or when there's relational difficulties, or when the health or family, or all these difficulties that we face, all these disappointments that we face in life, it is definitely very wounding for idealists, because I think they just have this sort of this innate optimism, about the way life can be or should be.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually very helpful for her, and it got her sort of started on the journey. She's the main author of the book. I sort of contributed here and there, but she is the main author of the Wounded Idealist book. And it was just a wonderful journey for us to go on as a couple, as we sort of studied things out together. But just, how God allows a lot of disappointments to happen, and it changes us from having optimism to having true faith, because there's a difference between the two, and I think, true faith is really deeper, because it's something that you see God working through the difficulties or through the disappointments, rather than just having a sort of blind optimism that everything will work out great, everything will turn out fine. But the journey to get to that turning out fine is not always straight and easy, So I think it's learning the difference between true faith and idealism or optimism is an important distinction, I think, for all Christians to go on that journey and learn.
I've had friends walk away from the church who I think struggle with that very thing you're talking about, and especially as you get into your 50s and 60s. For many in our generation, we saw the church before 2003 with intense idealism. We're going to win the world in this generation. And we've seen both before and after, and it's challenging, certainly. Yeah. Any advice? What can help a person who feels like they've lost their idealism?
One would be buy the book. It's available on Amazon.
Yeah, and the title again is
the Healing of a Wounded Idealist.
Okay,
is part one, and part two is the Humble Idealist. So it's available on Amazon, and I know I'm biased because I think my wife is a great writer, but it's a really good book, and it deals with all the aspects that I think that we go through: the self-pity when you get wounded, the gap between, the disappointment that we can feel about a number of things and how to process that, and the bridge that takes you, from being a cynic or being a wounded idealist to becoming a humble idealist. And I think a lot of a lot of the bridge is humility. It's just, it's dealing with your, your entitlement. I think sometimes idealists are entitled. They feel entitled to a certain outcome in lives. They feel entitled to certain things going well for them, and I think there's a lot of entitlement that comes with idealism, and I think humility is that bridge that takes you to a deeper faith. And of course, there are great examples of idealists in the Bible. Peter was an idealist, so much so, and he just was, you could see it in all his statements. Elijah was an idealist, and he totally had this sort of optimistic faith that everything was going well, and he was distraught, when stuff didn't go the way he hoped. And so there's some great examples of Bible characters. Moses was an idealist, and they all had journeys that they had to go on, their faith journey, to bring them back to a place of humility. So and that journey is not always easy, but it's definitely how God helps us how to deepen our faith.
Interesting. I look forward to reading that. That's there's so many times I've prayed to God, like, God, I prayed about this. You got to come through here. Throw me a bone. Help me out here. I've been praying about this a long time. How come you haven't answered my prayers? And I find myself, just struggling. It's just like, hey, God, you got to come through here. And that feeling of an unmet expectation, or like you said, entitlement, certainly comes through there at times.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. When you look back, you've seen the country before apartheid and then afterwards. How have you seen the country change over the course of your lifetime? It's a big question, but what are some of the big things that you've really seen change, at least since you became a Christian?
Because obviously it's huge. I mean, it's been a massive change from apartheid South Africa to now what we have now, And I mean, there's been so many positive changes and so much greater equality and freedom and equal opportunity for people and addressing the past, through through sort of mechanisms to help empower Black folk that have been disadvantaged. So there's been so many good things that have happened, in South Africa. Now there's obviously disappointments. There's obviously things that haven't gone so well, and there's been corruption, and there's been looting, and there's crime. Our crime rates are very high, And one of the scary things of being a dad with a daughter is that gender-based violence is very high. I think we have one of the highest in the world, and sort of the rape statistics are just dreadful, And so there's certainly things that haven't gone well, But I think to see it as this wonderful Black middle class and upper class sort of developing, which I think creates stability. To have a much more stable democracy, you really need a big, big middle class and that brings stability, to the country. So a lot of that has changed, although there's still a lot to go. But no, it's been a miracle to see how much has changed, and that it didn't, never went through a civil war, which was amazing. And a lot of that was to do with Nelson Mandela, who of course was just amazing, and his approach to things, and a hero to so many people that he kept us all together.
Right. There's a couple in our church that spent a number of years in South Africa, and they just shared about a home break-in, and it just, I mean, for them to recount it, they start crying. I mean, it's just so scary. I mean, they could just relive it. It's tough for them to share. Have you had any situations like that? Have you had any near-death experiences that have frightened you?
So I had a guy come in. I was visiting my dad in Cape Town when we lived down there, and they were painting some walls, and they had some painters in the house, and had 3 guys come in with guns, and lay us on the ground, threatened to kill us, were very sort of aggressive and angry. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this could be the moment that that they kill myself and my dad, and thankfully they didn't. They sort of just took they took my dad's car, they took some possessions, they took cell phones and watches and different things. But it was definitely one of those moments where you just think, oh my gosh, this is thankfully it wasn't as violent as I know the couple you were referring to, where they got physically beaten up,
right.
So it wasn't as violent as that, but definitely that was a moment where I thought, wow, this could be my last day here.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's scary. I remember the 95 South African conference. We were there, and it was wild. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not, we're not back in the States here. This is a different place entirely.
That's right. Wasn't there somebody shot a bullet through one of the windows in the hotel?
The elders, right? One of the elders had a bullet go through his window of the hotel, and also a person was shot right in front of the hotel, right at the entrance to the hotel. There was a police station right across the plaza, and I think he was an informer or something like that, and it's like an assassination right there in front. I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. I mean, we had to go out with armed guards, private guards, if we wanted to leave the hotel. It was definitely an eye opener for me, that's for sure. Yeah. And I don't want to scare everybody about South Africa. I know it's a beautiful country, and it's anyway. Thank you so much. I want to just ask one final question, Justin. What advice do you have for those who want to make their life count?
Yeah, I think you have to find your calling, because I think to make a difference, to make this world better, it's hard. This world doesn't naturally get better on its own,
Mm-hmm.
So to make the world a better place, to improve it for our kids, to help people get to heaven, it is tough. And so I think, having that calling and then that willingness to go through hardships, to see that, to go through sacrifice, to make sacrifices, to see that take place, I think would be my only encouragement. Nothing for me in sort of going in the ministry has been easy. It's been hard at every point. I think each move that we made from city to city, country to country, it was tough. Each year I feel, the ministry doesn't seem to get easier. It gets harder. Surely I've been doing this now for 30 years. This
Right.
should be a little easier. So I think it's having that sense of calling, and then being willing to just to make the sacrifices and pay the price that it takes to make things better, and to be able to impact people for God. I think that would be my advice. That's certainly from my life anyway. Those are the things that I found.
What, when you look forward, you're heading up Disciples today. What are your plans? What are your goals? What are you excited about over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so we started moving towards a lot more video content, from just written content, because obviously Disciples Today previously has done mostly articles and written content and websites, and we've started a TikTok channel, which is really fun for the younger generation. Our Instagram group is really picking up. Our Facebook page, is over 30,000 Facebook people that go to the RCOC Facebook page, which we manage as DT. So it's great to be in more new media and more video stuff. So we've started partnering with Kyle Spears on some videos, with Kidogo on some videos, with another group here in South Africa on some videos. So we started to try and produce much more video content for people, which we think is more the medium of how people ingest news and content. So I'm very excited about this. I'm excited about all these plans and ideas that we have for developing more and more media. And we've also got a new DT Heart and Soul app, which is coming out soon. And I think that'll improve the experience for so many people who use DT Heart and Soul. And we're also very excited. We've had over 100 marriages come from DT Heart and Soul.
Wow.
So we're looking forward to the next 100 happening.
That's right.
Soon. And I think the app will improve the user experience tremendously. So there's some very exciting projects that we're working on, which is, it's a little bit by little bit, but it's making progress.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and all the best to you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, thanks for having me on your podcast. And I love your podcast and all the work you do. It's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.